Should you go back to school and get a degree to transition into instructional design? Maybe you already have a degree, but it isn't in instructional design. Or perhaps you just have a bachelor's and want to know if you need a master's. If you're transitioning into this industry and considering investing in a master's program, then you're going to want to watch this video. The data I'll use to answer this question is full of surprises. And by the end of this video, you should know whether a master's in instructional design is going to be right for you. Hi, I'm Robbie Christian, and I've been revealing insights from a survey that the Devlin Peck team conducted of over 100 hiring managers. The results to the survey have been released, and you can find them in the link below the video. To answer today's questions, we're going to also draw upon responses from over 1,000 instructional designers. In this video, I'm going to reveal insights from 3 main topics. First, what level of education are employers looking for? Next, does someone with a master's degree earn more than someone with a bachelor's degree? And then finally, if not a master's degree, then what else should I do? So to start looking at all of this, we are going to just look straight at the data. We're going to look at the data from hiring managers in what is it that employers want, and we're going to look at that in terms of the minimum level of education that they will accept, and then also compare the preferred level of education that they would like to have. So when we look at the data, we see that the bachelor's degree is above and beyond the most common requirement to start out in a job. The next most common is not a master's. It's actually a high school diploma. And then third is master's. And you're looking at less than 10% of employers requiring you to have a master's, a graduate level certificate, and nobody's asking for a PhD or requiring a PhD from the responses that we received back. So based on the data, you still have a shot at 85% of the jobs if you stop at undergrad. And an additional 5% more of the jobs are opened up to you if you earn a graduate level certificate. Fewer than 1 in 10 employers require a master's degree. Fewer than 1 in 10. But that's just what they require. Sometimes we want more than we ask for. And so let's see what they want instead of what they're willing to settle for. Employers seem to want candidates who exceed the minimum requirements. And we can see that in the data as well with the education level they prefer. And so bachelor's degree is still at the top of the list with a master's degree coming in second. Not high school diploma, that's even farther down the list. And so having a master's degree won't make or break your job search, but it does give you an advantage. While 85% of employers will take someone with a bachelor's, half of them prefer candidates that go beyond undergrad. So let's rephrase that. By getting a master's degree, you will qualify for 15% more jobs, and you'll be preferred by the other half of employers. Now, you'll still need to compete with non-master's candidates also competing for the same jobs, but with on education level alone, you will have an advantage just on education level alone. Now, before going any further, I need to remind you that because we mainly work with people transitioning into corporate, the hiring manager survey data is appropriately skewed toward that sector. The data you just saw is from over 100 hiring managers, 62% of whom are in corporate. Now, the data would shift if we were a little heavier on a different industry like government or higher ed, but when we made the survey, we wanted to offer results to our audience that more accurately reflect what they are seeking. So that's the perspective from the employers, from the hiring managers, but and what jobs are currently out there. But the big question still remains: how does it translate to money in the bank? And so to answer that, we're going to look at the master's degree return on investment by first touching on the direct cost of the degree and then the opportunity cost of going back to school, comparing salaries of those with a master's and without a master's to figure out if you're going to earn more money, and ultimately answer the question, is it worth it? Is it worth it to go back to school and get a master's degree? So let's check out the upfront cost first. You're looking at a financial investment of about $20,000, give or take $5,000, and on average, it'll take about 1 to 2 years to complete. So there's a wide range within that, but just looking at the averages, this is what we're talking about. And so that's the time and the money, but what about the opportunity cost of getting a master's degree? This is the question of what else you could be doing during that time. That's what the opportunity cost is. And so while you spend about $20,000 over the course of 1 to 2 years, what else could you be doing? Many others pursue a bootcamp style program or graduate certificate for much less cost and much less time, and start already making money and gaining real world experiences while their colleagues pursuing an advanced degree are just hitting the halfway point. But we can't just stop our analysis at how much of an investment a master's degree is. We need to look at the return. The question we all want to answer is whether or not you will earn more with a master's degree or not. And the short answer is no. You won't earn more money with a master's degree. However, that does oversimplify a much too complex question and begs us to pick through the data to get a little bit more insight. And that's what I'm so excited about. So looking at the answers from the survey of over 1,000 instructional designers around the world, we narrowed it down to just those who report their earnings in the United States to have a fair comparison on the salary data. And the data tell us plainly that there's not much difference between having a bachelor's versus having a master's. In fact, just looking at the average numbers, it appears that you can even learn more if you only have a bachelor's degree. But the truth is that there's no statistical significance between the salaries with a bachelor's versus a master's. And so it's really bizarre, right? It's not what we expect. Everything we've been told up to this point is that with the master's, get the master's degree and you're going to be able to earn more. You get more money. You invest in it, but you get more money back. And so that makes us wonder, is it only correlation or is there actually causation here to cause those numbers to be the same? So maybe it's the result of instructional designers with bachelor's degrees being drawn more toward corporate, where employers don't care as much about degrees and where salaries are known to be generally higher than other industries like government or higher ed. So to show the difference in how employers value degrees, let's hop back over to the hiring manager survey results for just a second and take a look at the minimum level of education required between corporate and non-corporate employers. And more than 2/3 of corporate hiring managers will still accept a bachelor's or a high school diploma, while hardly any require a master's or higher. And as expected, when we move into the non-corporate world, we're talking about healthcare, government, higher ed, nonprofit, a master's degree is slightly more desired. But even then, still about 4 out of every 5 employers will still consider you if you have done anything less than a master's, like a high school, undergrad, even a graduate certificate. They'll still consider you. So we isolated the responses from corporate instructional designers only to have an even more fair comparison. And interestingly, there is no statistical significance between the salaries of instructional designers with bachelor's or master's degrees. And so then I thought to myself, okay, surely we're not working with a random sample, right? This couldn't possibly be a random sample. Our respondents that only have an undergraduate degree must be years into their career by now. And somehow those who answered the survey with a master's degree, they just happen to all be starting out. So that must be where the discrepancy is in our data. So to break it down even further, looking at the numbers from instructional designers who are in their first 3 years on the job, we see that those who have a bachelor's degree are actually earning more than those with a master's. though obviously without statistical significance. We're only talking a whopping $35 difference over the course of a year. So there must be something unusual, right, with the new hires. Surely, instructional designers with advanced degrees that have been on the job for 4 to 8 years are making more than their bachelor counterparts. That must be the case. And so when we look at the data, when the calculations have finished, that is indeed correct. However, the difference in the average is less than $1,000. In other words, there's no statistical significance in the difference between the salaries of instructional designers, whether they have a bachelor's or a master's degree. No difference. And when comparing the numbers at the 9 to 15-year range, the bachelor's instructional designers were actually earning about $10,000 more than their master's counterparts. But the sample size became a little bit too small to draw meaningful conclusions from that, and so we didn't include it here. So while you're coming to grips with the fact that there's no clear advantage to having a master's when it comes to salaries, let's revisit the return on investment. Now remember that you'll spend about $20,000 over the course of 1 to 2 years. And now that we've seen the salary data, we can actually put together meaningful numbers to calculate the opportunity cost. So what could you have been earning as an instructional designer while you were getting your master's? If you pursue an option to gain practical knowledge and skills like a boot camp at less than half the cost of a master's, then you can land a job making about $80,000 a year, just starting out. This means that for the additional year that you would have been in the master's program, spending money on the degree, you could have made about $80,000 in earnings. Not to mention saved $10,000 to $15,000 that you would have been spending on the master's program. And so this puts your return on investment beyond negative $90,000. Negative $90,000 is your return on that right out of the gate. And because the salaries have no statistically significant difference, you shouldn't expect to recover the cost. So the main benefit to that nearly $100,000 is the fact that you have access to more job opportunities. That's the main benefit. There are other benefits, but that's the main one. And I say non-financial versus financial. It's indirect and direct financial return, but that's the idea. And so you'll qualify with a master's. You'll qualify for nearly every job instead of 4 out of 5 that you would have qualified for with a bachelor's. And half of the employers out there will prefer you over your colleagues that only have a bachelor's, the other half. So almost everyone will prefer you with a master's instead of a bachelor's. So if you have the passion and motivation, money, and desire to pursue specific jobs, those specific jobs that require a master's degree, such as typically the ones you find in government and healthcare work, or government and higher ed, rather, government and higher ed, then a master's degree could be a really great option for you. However, the data show that if you aren't specifically interested in the jobs that require an advanced degree, you can start earning just as high a salary much sooner. So now that we've talked about the degrees for so long, there's a really important question we still need to address. Does the degree have to be relevant to instructional design? We're talking instructional design systems, learning and technologies, curriculum and instruction, learning design and technology, instructional design and technology, learning experience design. The list goes on. Those are what we're talking about. Does it need to be one of those things? Or for that matter, does it even need to be an education at all? And my own story, my answer is no, it doesn't. The degree doesn't have to be relevant to instructional design. My own story, I did physics in undergrad and business for grad school. And so between my own intuition and experience building courses in Articulate, being thoughtful and perceptive about what makes effective and ineffective e-learning and different techniques, a bunch of YouTube videos, and Devlin's bootcamp, I pivoted careers and became a successful freelance instructional designer without ever having any formal education in learning, design, technology, education, etc. The data make the point that the master's degree isn't going to give you an advantage unless you're looking for a specific position. But I wanted to share my story because if you have a degree, but that degree just happens to not be in instructional design, it still doesn't matter. Leverage the skills and the knowledge and the experiences that you already have. Then learn instructional design. Whether you have a degree or not, you still need the knowledge and the skills. I'm not telling you that because you don't need a degree, it means that you can just join the industry today without any knowledge or skills. That's not at all the case. If going back to school is how you upskill, and it's the best way for you to learn, then that's great. Just make sure that you're doing it for the knowledge and the skills instead of just purely the credential itself. And if you don't want to go back to school, then you still need to put in a serious effort to learn how to become an instructional designer. And if you've come to the end of this video and determined that an advanced degree is not the right fit for you, but want to know your options for gathering the knowledge and skills you need, I want to offer some alternatives to getting a degree. Other options include free resources, such as reading articles, books, and watching videos on this YouTube channel. You could pursue standalone courses like the ones you might find throughout independent designers or via platforms like LinkedIn Learning. Graduate certificates are a popular option for getting enough introduction into the industry without the full commitment of doing an entire degree. And then finally, there are programs out there that worked for me specifically, like the Devlin Peck Bootcamp. A couple of years after going through it and working successfully as a freelance instructional designer, I'm now the bootcamp coordinator, and I, along with the rest of the team, give personalized one-on-one support to help transitioning instructional designers pivot into a career as an ID in as little as about 6 months. And so as we get into 2024, I hope that you consider your options for upskilling and transitioning into this amazing industry. We hope that this video helps you make data-informed decisions on a big career shift like this. So do you think there's anything that I missed, or maybe something you think is important that we didn't take into account? Put your idea down in the comments and we can consider it for an upcoming video. And as always, if you enjoyed the insights from today, do us a favor and like the video, but also subscribe so you can stay up to date with the latest content we make. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.